Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, Section 35. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble Through the Dolomites, by Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 14. Caprile to Botzen, Part 2. Corfara is, of course, over the Austrian border, and its people are as thoroughly Austrian as if Campidello and Caprile were not each within a few hours' journey. Herr Franz is the only member of his family who speaks Italian. Neither old Rottenera, nor his daughter, nor any soul about the village except the priest, understands a syllable of any language but their own. The great surprise of Corfara, however, is its church. It is not wonderful, after all, to find a solitary genius springing up here and there, even in the wildest soil. Not many miles from Titian's birthplace we found the Ghedinas. In the valley where Brusitolan was born, we came upon the young wood sculptor of Bragarezza. It is not, therefore, so surprising that Corfara should produce its painter. But it is certainly somewhat startling, when, having strolled out by and by, after the storm has tailed off, into a dull drizzle, we peep in at yonder tiny, humble-looking church, and find ourselves in the midst of the most lavish decorations. Here, where one would have expected to find only whitewash, are walls covered with intricate medieval diapering, shrines, altars, and triptychs, loaded with carved and painted saints, and gorgeous with profuse gilding, stalls, organ loft, and seats elaborately sculptured, all in the most ornate style of early German Gothic, all apparently new, all blazing with burnished gold and glowing with color. The sight of this splendor is so amazing that for the first few minutes one can only wonder in silence, and that wonder is increased when, happening presently to meet the priest, we learn from him that all these adornments are the work of the peasant population of the place, of those very haymakers whom we heard singing this morning in the hay, designed by them, carved by them, painted by them, gilded by them, and the pious free will offering of their hands. It is a small place, and the inhabitants do not number more than 260 or 270 souls, children included. But, says the priest, smiling, they are all artists. He is a gentlemanly priest, and expresses himself in very choice Italian. He speaks of Corfara in a smiling, well-bred, deprecating way, as a lost, out-of-the-way spot, and of the church, though one would think he must feel proud of it, as pretty for so poor a place. When I praise the decorations, he shrugs his shoulders, and implying that better might have been done with larger means. One good thing we have, though, he says, which the signoras have not seen, but which I shall be pleased to show if they do not mind the trouble of returning. So we turn back, this interview having taken place just outside the churchyard gate, and, re-entering the church, follow him to the back of the altar, where are a pair of painted doors now folded back out of sight, but brought round to the front, he says, in Lent, and closed over the face of the altar. These paintings represent the decollation of St. Catherine, to whom the church is dedicated, and, according to the Parocco, were executed in the 14th or 15th century by an artist named Tessini, who, as the story goes, and it is always the same story with these village treasures, being detained at Corfara by stress of weather, painted these pictures and presented them to the church in return for the hospitality of the priest. Beyond this our Parocco has nothing to tell. He knows no more than I who this Tessini was, when or where he lived, or whence he came. No mention of him occurs in the comprehensive volumes of Crowe and Cavalcaselle on painting in North Italy, and his works at Corfara obtain not a line of notice in the pages of Ball's Guide, or of Messrs. Gilbert and Churchill's Dolomite Mountains. I, who never even heard of him before, can only judge from the style of his work that he was a North Italian of the Bellinese school. The paintings, which are of course on panel, are executed in a brilliant, crystalline, early style, and recall the work of Memling even more than the work of the Friulian painters. The St. Catherine, slender, round-faced, and fair, is quite of the German type, while the exquisite finish of the costumes, the delicate use of the gilding, and the elaborate treatment of patterns and textures remind one of Carlo Crivelli. 4 other paintings, also on panel, representing St. Catherine and other saints, adorn the front of the altar. These works, deeper in tone, but evidently belonging to the same period, are supposed by the priest to be by some other hand. At all events, they are all interesting, while the larger paintings at the back are unquestionably of rare beauty and value. As we leave the church, 2 little girls come running after the priest to kiss his hand, an act of homage which he excuses to us in his apologetic, smiling way, saying that it is the custom here, and that the children are simple and mean well. Being now come to where the paths diverge, he wishes us a pleasant journey, lifts his little skull-cap with a courtly air, and turns away to his own home, a cheerful-looking white house with smart blinds and pots of flowers in the windows, and a fat poodle sitting at the gate. Returning presently to the inn, just as the drizzle thickens and the light begins to fail, we encounter a phenomenon. It stands in the little yard between the albergo and the dépendance, discoursing and gesticulating in the midst of a group composed of the ratoneras, our guides, and a few miscellaneous men and stable-boys. It wears high-lows, a battered straw hat, and a brown garment, which may be described either as a long kilt or the briefest of petticoats. Its hair is sandy, its complexion crimson, its age anything between 45 and 60. It carries a knapsack on its back and an alpenstock in its hand. The voice is the voice of a man. The face, tanned and travel-stained as it is the face of a woman. She is gabbling German, apparently describing her day's tramp across the mountains, and seems highly gratified by the peals of laughter which occasionally interrupt her narrative. "A guide!" she exclaims, replying to an observation of some bystander. "Not I! What do I want with a guide? I have carried my own knapsack and found my own way through France, through England, through Italy, through Palestine. I have never taken a guide, and I have never wanted one. You are all lazy fellows, and I will have nothing to do with you. Fatigue is nothing to me. Distance is nothing to me. Danger is nothing to me. I have been taken by brigands before now. What of that? If I had had a guide with me, would he have fought them? Not a bit of it. He would have run away. Well, I neither fought nor ran away. I made friends of my brigands. I painted all their portraits. I spent a month with them, and we parted the best comrades in the world. Ugh! Guides, indeed! All very well for incapables, but not for me. I am afraid of nothing, neither of the Pope nor the devil." Somewhat startled by this tremendous peroration, we go in and leave her discoursing, and I don't know that I have ever experienced a more lively sense of gratification and relief than when I presently learn that this lady is a German. She is no stranger, it seems, at Corfara, but appears every now and then in this mad fashion, sometimes putting up at the Ratonaras for several weeks together. She paints, she botanizes, and I think they said she writes. Giuseppe, who describes her as a signora molto brutta e molto allegra, tells next day how she supped that night at the guides' table and entertained them hugely. The way from Corfara to St. Ulrich lies along the Gader Thal, through the village of Colfosco, and up a high and lonely valley between the Gardernazza and Sella massives. There was not a living soul in Colfosco as we rode through, nothing but a ghastly, attenuated Christ on a house-side, nearly as large as life, and splashed horribly as if with blood from head to foot. The whole village was out on the hills, the oldest and youngest at work with the strongest, getting in the hay. From above Corfara, and as far as the top of the pass, our path lay close under the tremendous precipices of that part of the Stella known as the Pisa du Spitz. The mountain on this side assumes magnificent proportions, preserving always its characteristic likeness to a Titanic fortress, and showing now and then, through clefts in those giant ramparts, glimpses of a great snowy plateau within, with here and there a blue fold of downward creeping glacier, or a fall of misty cascade. As we mount higher, the last patches of corn and flax give place to a broad, desolate space of boggy turf, intersected by a network of irregular cattle tracks and scattered over with scores of wooden crosses. These mark where travelers have been found dead. They say at Corfara that this Colfosco Col is the most dangerous of all the Dolomite passes, and that the wind in winter rages up here with such fury that it drives the snow and sleet in great clouds which bury and suffocate men and cattle in their progress. There is also no defined path, and the bog is everywhere treacherous. And now, the summit reached and passed, the Lang Cofel rises on the left above woods and hilltops, a vast, solitary tower with many pinnacles. A sheltered gorge thinly wooded with fir trees opens before us. The long, impending rain begins again, hard and fast, and the path becoming soon too steep for riding, we have to dismount and walk in a pelting storm down a steep mountainside to Santa Maria Gardena, which is the first hamlet at the head of the Grosvenor Thal. Here we put up at a tiny osteria till the sky clears again, and then push on for St. Ulrich. Our way lies now along the Grosvenor Thal, green and wooded and sparkling with villages. The Sella is gradually left behind. The Lang Cofel becomes more lofty and imposing. The Platt Kogel, like a half-dome, rises into view. The wooded slopes of the Seisser Alp close in the valley on the left, and the Schlern, as seen for the first time through a vista of ravine, shows like a steep black wall of rock, flecked here and there with snow. Every last trace of Italy has now vanished. The landscape, the houses, the names and signs above the doors, are all German. The peasants we meet on the road are square-set, fair, blue-eyed, and boorish. The men carry wooden krazen on their backs, as in Switzerland. Unmistakable signs and tokens now begin to tell of the approach to St. Ulrich. The wayside crucifixions are larger, better carved, better painted, and some are picked out with gold. By and by we pass a cottage outside the door of which stands a crate piled high with little wooden horses. In the doorway of another house a workman is polishing an elaborately carved chair. And presently we pass a cart full of nothing but dolls' legs, every leg painted with a smart white stocking and an emerald green slipper. And now the capital of Toyland comes in sight, an extensive, substantial-looking hamlet scattered far and wide along the slopes on the right bank of the torrent. The houses are real German Tyrolean homesteads, spacious, many-windowed, with broad eaves and bright green shutters, and front gardens full of flowers. There are two churches, a little old lower church, and a large, smart upper church, with a bulbous belfry tower painted red. And there are at least half a dozen inns, all of which look clean and promising. The whole place, in short, has a bright, prosperous, commercial air about it, like a Swiss manufacturing town. Here, at the Gasthaus of the White Horse, we are cordially received by a group of smiling girls, all sisters, who show us into excellent rooms, give us roast beef and prunes for supper, and entertain us with part songs and zitter playing in the evening. End of section 35.